I was lucky enough to attend Health 2024 in Las Vegas, and this was the second time I've attended Health USA, and it did not disappoint. I spent hours and hours interviewing different leaders and experts throughout the event, so here's my whirlwind roundup of the hottest topics that were front of mind during the event. AI was not surprisingly the hottest topic, but we're at a tipping point now. The hype is real, but the industry is hungry for real-world, tangible use cases. Many are feeling now that the noise around artificial intelligence is kind of more of a distraction. And we need to move from talk to action to see AI make a real difference in healthcare. We need proof, not promises. Women's health was also a huge focus, and rightfully so. We had deeper conversations on how much a gap still exists in tailored healthcare solutions for half the population. Better women's health drives broader population health outcomes, and there's a critical need for more innovation in maternal health, fertility, and mental health solutions. Another hot topic was data and how it's the new currency. But not all data is created equal. See, we've got no challenge collecting it right now. Sorting it and knowing what to do with it is the next big challenge. The most impact comes from helping to make sense of it all and turning raw numbers into actionable care. The next topic, healthcare, is still deeply fragmented. There's a strong appetite for solutions that bridge gaps across providers, payers, and patients. Interoperability continues to be a major sticking point on this topic, but there's progress, even if it's slow. Next up, VCs want bold solutions. And what was the sentiment from them at Health? Go big or go home. Many are encouraging startups to think beyond incremental improvements and tackle the big, bold, system-wide changes. And with that, you need capital, and a lot of it. Lastly, mental health solutions are on the rise. Beyond the buzzwords, there's real momentum in mental health technology. From AI-powered therapy to tech-driven solutions for early detection, this space is booming with plenty of room for innovation. In this special feature episode of the Talking HealthTech podcast, you'll hear a handful of the conversations I had with speakers and key opinion leaders who were out in full force at Health. There are plenty more where that came from though, so after you're done with this episode, jump over to our special Health 2024 playlist on YouTube and you can catch all of them on demand, and the link for that's in the show notes of this episode. Collaboration starts with a conversation, Team HealthTech. Let's make it happen.
I'm Monica Soni. I'm the Chief Medical Officer at Covered California, and I am a practicing primary care doctor. Covered California is the California state-based exchange. It's essentially Obamacare, and we cover over 1.8 million Californians.
Amazing. Excellent. I'd like to learn a little bit more about that because, the American healthcare system operates quite differently to the Australian healthcare system. Good mix of listeners across Talking HealthTech in both the US and Australia. But tell me a little bit more about what makes Covered California a little bit unique and how it fits in with the healthcare system.
Yes, we have a very complicated system in the United States, but I will say that post the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare, Covered California or the state-based exchanges filled an important gap. So if you get in your insurance through your employer, great. If you're low income, we have Medicaid, our coverage through that process, and we fill the gap. So we're for folks that aren't low income enough to get Medicaid but don't have coverage through their workplace. And that was millions and millions of folks in America who actually couldn't get insurance in any other way. So we are the marketplace. So folks can come on and shop for commercial or private insurance. And in California, we're actually an active purchaser. So we make sure that the quality of care that they get, the plans that are available to them are really high quality.
Interesting. And I guess like that, in terms of the why, I would imagine then, a big issue globally, but particularly in the US, is ensuring that as many people as possible can have access to good quality healthcare. Is that right?
That's exactly right. And that it's not confusing. So when you choose Plan A or Plan B, are you still going to be able to see a primary care doctor in an affordable way? Can you get your diabetes medication for as little as possible? We make sure that it's actually standard benefits. So all you have to shop on is which provider do I want to see, which brand name plan do I want, not navigating a bunch of other benefits.
Yeah, got you. And it's government?
It is government, yes.
It is government. So what brings you to an innovative healthcare conference like this?
Yes. So, even though we're government, I like to say that we're very innovative. Covered California was essentially a startup, right? The regulation passed out of DC. And then 10 years ago, we were invented. And really, nobody knew if it was going to work or not. So we actually have a lot of unique provisions at Covered California to protect our consumer, to make sure that they are getting that care that they want. And we do a ton of interesting stuff around generative AI, around quality, around equity, financial accountability, thinking about our consumers first, human-centered design. All of this is happening under the umbrella of government.
What would some of those, say, more innovative technologies, because on the surface it might be just ensuring that people can have access to different coverage when they kind of fall through the gaps, but how can utilizing some of these cool technologies further assist in what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing is that our platform is super easy to use. So folks can come on, answer 4 questions, and we can actually direct them to the best health plan for themselves or for their families. The other thing is when you come on and give us pretty basic information about your income and what your healthcare needs are, we can tell you what other benefits you might qualify for in the state of California. So a little bit of a clearinghouse as well. Sometimes that means not coming to us. It means getting insurance actually through our Medicaid agency, and we can facilitate that too. We have automatic enrollment from our Medicaid agency to Covered California, so all this back-end processing. And then the other piece is our service center, which is where folks can call in, is really state-of-the-art. Again, meant to be very human-centered approach. We have chat bots. So all of it is, however you want to enter, whatever door you want to come through, we make it easy for you to get what you need.
Yeah, interesting. And so I understand you're on a stage during health. You're presenting some stuff. Tell me a little bit more about what you're talking about.
Yes. So I'm presenting Redistributing the Healthcare Dollar, which, again, because of the financing in the U.S. healthcare system, super difficult. We don't pay for prevention. We mostly don't pay for wellness. We pay for sick care. And so we at Covered California, of course, if you have chronic conditions and you have needs, we want to make sure that you're getting those needs met. But frankly, we're thinking about how to take dollars away from our health plans and putting it back into community and back into our consumers and our members.
Yeah, amazing. And so I imagine there'd be opportunity for other government systems to think differently about what they're doing. What would you hope that perhaps other healthcare, it doesn't matter what it is, healthcare institutions, payers or other parts where otherwise it might feel like innovation might be difficult to get over the line? How can you kind of get those first wheels turning?
Yeah, great question. So I think first of all, it's to be unafraid. So, we did things like making sure that we asked about race, ethnicity, other demographic information, sexual orientation, gender identity up front in the flow of our application. So now we have this incredibly rich database, which we can combine with utilization. And so actually with surgical precision, we can say, we know this population is not getting the care that they need or doesn't have the coverage that they need. So that's one piece, is actually being forward thinking about data and data collection and how you leverage that and do data exchange. And then I think the other part of it is financial accountability for the partners. So we have very progressive contract requirements for our health plan partners, as I mentioned, around quality, equity, access, even around use of generative AI, to make sure, again, that we are pushing that really cutting edge of what it means to have high quality, equitable, accessible care.
Yeah, amazing. There's a bit of a balance too, isn't there? I guess a constant theme I hear about is the need for all the different stakeholders to kind of come together, to collaborate, to come up with solutions. Sometimes that means that, for someone to get, another side has to give. How do you kind of come up with arrangements where kind of, I guess, everyone wins to ensure that patients receive the best quality care?
That is a fantastic question. Maybe I'll share that there are other public purchasers in the state of California. I mentioned our Medicaid agency. There's another one that employs state employees. The 3 of us have aligned, and we actually represent over 45% of all Californians. And we're a gigantic state, as you know, right? And I think it is a give and take, right? We, for example, have a lot of focus on childhood wellness and maternity, not because we actually have a lot of kids. Most of those are covered through our Medicaid agency. We don't have a ton of births. Most of those are covered through our Medicaid agency. But we think about the good of California. Actually, our vision statement is not about just our enrollees. It's actually about improving the health of all Californians. So implicit in that is this idea of compromise, right? What's the long-term vision for all of us?
Yeah. Amazing. Any other final thoughts or things you're most looking forward to here at Health, other than getting a petunia stuffing over there?
I'm going to go do that. But also, it's just been amazing to see folks from all different parts of my life. I saw someone from my high school, someone from my medical school here, just doing really fascinating and amazing things. And I think to your last question, if we actually think about ourselves as a collective, that we're not competing for resources, we don't have scarcity mindset, just think what we can do and unlock.
I'm Dr. Michelle Stevens. I am Chief Revenue Officer of Felt, and I am from San Francisco. I have 2 small boys. They're 9 and 11. And so Felt is a digital health platform that actually connects with other health and wellness apps that track metrics or track health data. And this could be like products or content or actual like digital metrics like your heart rate, respiratory rate, O2 sat, etc. And what we do is easily provide care services through the app that you are delivering your product and service through.
Interesting. So your focus is working with the developers of perhaps bespoke solutions that might be focusing on a particular modality or like particular type of illness, like anyone that requires
could really be anything from like nutrition to mental health to urgent care. We're working with a few products right now, and really they're in the fertility through pediatric space. But it's because these folks are trying to track their health metrics in the consumer world, and they don't know what to do with the data. As a neuroscientist, I'm really passionate about understanding health through data, but collecting data for the sake of data, I believe, is ethically wrong. And so I want to be able to close the loop on healthcare. And I think delivering care services in this way can be one of the ways in which we do that.
Yeah, interesting. And so by working with the different developers of technology solutions that might then be, I guess, connecting in through Felt, why couldn't they just build something like that themselves?
Great question. I'm so glad you asked. This is actually the problem that I ran into with my previous company, Oathcare. But really, when you deliver care services, there is so much operational cost. There is so much risk and heavy lifting. And it is a whole company in and of itself to provide care services. Now, you see a lot of these vertically integrated health, digital health services that do the full stack, do the whole thing. They want to own the whole thing, from the audience to the pipeline to the data to the care services. And unfortunately, this is what could actually be the end of digital health products vertically integrated, because they're trying to do too much. They have too many services at stake. And what we are offering is a very slim way of entering into a product that can easily turn on, like within a couple of weeks, a care providing service.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, what's the saying about you don't want to go 1,000 miles wide and 2 inches deep? If you can work with people who do it all the time, then you're going to be able to do it a lot better.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
And so you mentioned that this was the problem that you ran into before. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my previous company that I was the co-founder and chief nursing officer was Oathcare. And Oathcare was a digital health platform that was seeking to be a many-to-many model of healthcare. So, healthcare is usually delivered one-to-one. But we situated parents from pregnancy through age 5 with a wide variety of clinicians. So think doulas, nurses, doctors, mental health therapists, all sorts of speech, lactation, sleep consultants, and put them all in the same room with each other. So you could have everyone in the same room talking to each other, delivering care advice and support, communicating in one space to learn from each other, but be able to actually not have this sort of silo, generic, often patriarchal sort of delivery of care, but have it be communal, have it be helpful so that people can feel fully supported wherever they are at it.
Yeah. And so we were talking before, so and you've obviously moved to Felt now. What happened
That's right.
with that model?
Yeah, so we actually raised quite a bit of money for being a seed stage company, a bit over $9 million. And it was during COVID, of course, during the pandemic, where really the move was to go direct to consumer. We had a very lovable product, but we started scaling right as people were kind of turning away from consumer health. And so we were finding ourselves really having a hard time scaling our product because we were going a single D2C channel. We actually even turned down, honestly, a hospital health system contract because we were told to focus on a single go-to-market strategy and really double down on that. So many lessons to be learned. I think one of them is definitely to, yes, open up all of your go-to-market channels, all of your go-to-market strategies to see and test where your product will actually land and where it will build traction. We built traction in D2C. It was a great channel, but it shouldn't have been the only channel.
Yeah, interesting. No, well, that's it's interesting on that side, making sure you don't close doors. I guess at that early stage, you want to ensure you got that product market fit, find the right place that can have traction now.
Yes.
Even though the other ones might be great, but I guess you need to demonstrate that fit early on. So there's some good lessons there. Any other kind of, because there's a lot of health tech startups and innovative ideas here at Health. Other advice that you'd give to those that are looking to, I guess, transform the system through technology and actually have an impact?
Yes. Healthcare is a big bureaucratic system. And as much as we may want to transform healthcare is very fragmented and broken in a lot of ways. I think the thing to keep in mind is to actually build within the system as much as you can, knowing that you are going to try to get as far away from the system eventually once you have more control and autonomy over the market. Yeah. But I think I was a little too naive and wanting to build too outside of the system early on, which I think created more friction than ability to really fit in well. We were too differentiated, if you will, which I think VCs love to hear how differentiated you are, love to hear, but in terms of the market, that could be a very different scenario. I also think healthcare requires a lot of capital dollars, especially if you're going to change fundamentally the model of healthcare. And so actually be bold and brazen and go out and raise a lot of capital. And I know this is also very antithetical to what people hear, but if you really want to make something as big and bold of a change in healthcare, you need a lot of capital to do it. And so don't be afraid to ask for those big dollars and to really take the time to prove out your model and to get it to scale.
Where do you find those dollars would go? Is it just getting heaps of people to be able to build stuff, or is it just to buy more runway?
It's everything, right? It's in your product and how you are building it. It is in your team. It is in the culture. It's in actually building a new brand around what you're doing. We actually had to have people start paying attention to community models of care. We had to have people actually start paying attention to early childhood care, which is wild, but thankfully there are movements now, I think because of Oath, that have inspired people to focus on parental health and pediatric health. Yeah, this is such a highly engaged audience, pediatrics, especially with parents. They're willing to spend all the money, they're willing to spend all the time and change all of the behaviors in order to care for themselves and their child. And I think that's a ripe audience for digital health implementation.
Yeah. Well, it's an area that you're super passionate about, being that early childhood care and the pediatric side. Why is that such a strong focus for you? And what's the big issue there?
Yes, I'm so glad you asked. So my PhD is actually on understanding early childhood stress and its direct correlation to adult health outcomes. And I don't know if you know this, but early childhood stress, particularly the phenomenon of ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, they have a direct correlation to 7 out of the top 10 chronic illnesses we face in America today. And so that's to say, if we actually started paying attention to early childhood stress, quantifying it, really implementing interventions, we would be able to then radically improve health outcomes for future generations. I was working on particularly a quantitative measure of stress. We have so many biomarkers in our system that can actually tell how our body is responding to stress individually. And yet we only measure and track a child's height, weight, and head circumference through age 18. And so this is a massive disservice that is happening. And I'm very passionate about trying to implement new changes and protocols for early childhood.
Yeah, I didn't know a lot of that, so I can see how that would be super important. A lot to be done. Sounds like there's been some awareness there, but a lot more work to be done. And then thinking about then other things that you're doing, what else are you working on in the ecosystem?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. So I'm also building a nonprofit. It's called Act 17, and it's really a nonprofit to bridge the gap between faith and technology. So I happen to be Christian, and Christian happens to be hyper technology focused. So I don't think of another industry like tech that is so aligned with Christianity, if you will. Very future thinking, very abundant mindset, very co-creative, and very forgiving. Like, of course, the second-time founders, you're more likely to get funded, right? Whereas if you maybe fail in other industries, you're out of luck. So I think there's something to be said around understanding how you can bring your own faith and spirituality into your work, and how you can actually build, not for self around money, fame, and power, but to actually build for other, to build for the eternal, to build for future generations.
Oh, that's cool. I like that cross section there. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Thank you.
And lastly, we're at health, still early on in the on the dance card. What do you hope? I believe you're up on stage. You've got a session tomorrow. What are you hoping people take away from that, either from seeing your session or from the conferences?
Yes. So my session's on So You Want to Be a Founder, and it's going to give you the real on founder life. It also has venture capital partners as well on the panel. And so what I'm really hoping people will understand is that it is very difficult to be a founder, and there are a lot of real hard lessons learned. And I think people are not willing to share and be vulnerable about them because a lot of it has to do with self, and a lot of it has to do with not performing well.
Yes.
And I, for one, have benefited my whole life from learning from other lessons, including my own. And so just expect a real sort of fire and hot take perspective on founder life.
Thanks for having me on. Dr. Mitesh Rao. I'm an emergency medicine physician, founder and CEO of Omni Health. We're a data layer for the U.S. that now represents many of the largest provider organizations all over the country, helping them bring their data forward. I spent my career as a health system executive. So prior to starting Omni, I led safety and quality for Stanford, and before that was one of the leads for innovation for Northwestern. So I've always been kind of on the health system side, and built Omni out of, frankly, frustration, where I kept having pharma, med device companies doing cutting-edge patient-centered research, early AI companies who all wanted to partner with us on the best-in-class data we had sitting within our four walls on the health system side. But the challenge was, how do you bring that out at scale? And how do you do it in a secure, compliant way that can really enable the future of healthcare, which in my mind was going to be completely data-driven. And because I could not find the infrastructure to be able to enable that, we raised venture capital and started Omni, and have now grown that into a national platform that covers all 50 states, and today it sits across over 1 billion encounters coming from 500,000 providers nationwide. So,
That's good context. I definitely understand that problem to solve. We can unpack that in a little bit. But when you say a data layer, what does Omni look like?
Yeah. So we'll take in the data from across all of these organizations. We take it in from the source. We have direct partnerships with these organizations all over the country. We handle cleaning, structuring, de-identifying, tokenizing, bringing them into a common data model, and taking that raw healthcare data that comes out of the archaic healthcare infrastructure and turning it into research and regulatory grade real-world data and evidence. And that allows it to be used for everything from research to trials to quality improvement to patient safety work, and to now even AI. Right? Yeah. Being a foundational data layer that is deep, comprehensive, representative, which we definitely talk about that in the AI space and why representation matters actually when you're training models. And then deep data from the source, which means you can align the provenance, you can understand the validity of data. It's a really interesting dimension that we often don't think about when we think about the broader healthcare tech stack.
And help me get my head into the right mind frame here, because often we talk about, or sometimes we talk about when we think about demystifying the complexity around healthcare data, it might be about putting the data in the patient's hands and helping them kind of take all the different fragmented information to help make more informed decisions. What we're talking about is kind of on the other side of like being able to then take a more aggregated view of what's going on within the health system and understand trends, or like tell me a little bit more.
A couple dimensions, right? So one, our core mission is really connecting the different stakeholders. So we see opportunities as you're advancing healthcare, as you're building everything from new biologics to safer medical devices to training algorithms. How do you connect the different stakeholders? So we see Omni as a common language of data that can actually serve as a foundation for collaboration between providers, biopharma, med device, AI companies. Without that data, the data silo, there's no real way for them to create those long-standing scalable collaborations.
Yeah.
So that's sort of where we sit. We call ourselves the rails or the pipes for data.
Yeah. And my mind often goes back to in this conversation about the importance, and because we feel this problem a lot back home in Australia of the need for more standardized, consistent information so that we can power interoperable solutions and all of that. And often the solution to that will be that, everyone's working to a common standard of data and all the vendors need to kind of come to the party there. And there's a lot of kind of complexity that's involved in getting people to that point. So I assume this is like almost like how does this fit in with, like, you've got different standards of information and that might solve the problem. Then we've got, say, Omni. How does that?
Yeah, the Omni data layer is designed to be agnostic of the underlying tech stack, data models, everything that an existing organization uses, right? So I'll give you an example here. If you look at one health system, let's say has a dozen hospitals in it, how each hospital codes something can have variability and difference. Sometimes there's different instances of the same EMR, sometimes there's different EMR, sometimes even in the same instance of the EMR, each section is kind of has a different way of aligning and encoding the data. And so there's a lot that has to happen in data normalization in order to create consistent data, even at one organizational level. Now you take a step back and you start thinking about this across 50 organizations, right? Across all 50 states, about stitching it across multiple EMRs, multiple tech stacks. That's kind of where we sit in creating one common language. And our network today is over 75 million patients. By end of year, it'll be over 100 million patients. And regardless of whether that's data that is from an underlying, let's say, National Cancer Institute or Children's Hospital or large integrated delivery network or community group, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what EMR they're on. It doesn't matter how they're aligning their current data. It's all consistent on the Omni data layer, right? So we're talking national level, consistent, deep, comprehensive data that for the first time is available as a foundational piece for not just everything from like rare disease research for patients, but building the next generation of care pathway development or large language models that can actually do things like predict adverse events for patients.
Yeah. That all sounds really cool. And I've seen, and as you mentioned, every hospital does things a little bit differently. Every field is used slightly different because everyone's unique and everyone's special. The solution sounds great. Everything is consistent. For you, bringing on a new hospital or a system and all of that, is it just a bunch of people trying to map it in the back end, or is this where we start talking about the funky AI? What's the?
That's why we've raised venture capital. We're in year 6 of our journey because we built an automated tech stack that handles that. So if I were to bring on a new hospital system, generally in a matter of weeks, we have them up and running with clean, consistent data. So we do it very quickly. For the most part, I would say 95% automated. There's a piece of it where you do want a human in the loop, right? Particularly around validation and confirmation, because we want to take no risk when it comes to this data, right? Both from how it's aligned to ensure that it is truly best in class to things like ensuring de-identification and ensuring compliance, right? Because that's, at the end of the day, that's one of the things that makes our industry so unique, is that the data itself, we have very strict standards, right? And purposefully so, because we have this sacred duty to protect patients. And that's an important differentiator that I think we always have to keep in mind. It's one of the things that has always kind of, people looked at it as a burden. I actually see it as a really important guide rail for how we do things, because it ensures that we're always keeping that as our North Star.
Yeah.
Compliance, security, right? Taking no risk and really centering everything that happens on data on the patient's benefit.
Yeah. All of these points are resonate with me in terms of ensuring consistent data, the compliance, the regulation, the security, all of that. You mentioned, huge presence in the US. These are global issues that need to be addressed.
They are.
Is this a scalable solution at a global level?
Yeah, it will. We'll be looking to start expanding overseas probably as early as next year.
Yeah.
So we're starting to think about new areas to grow. I mean, the U.S. healthcare system has a lot to already do within it, so it's keeping our team very busy.
Yeah.
But we started to look at expanding into South America, Southeast Asia, other areas where there's a lot of potential to start to create a global data layer. And, a lot of the growth for us and demand is now starting to stem into the AI space, where healthcare is a very unique industry in that it's very, very difficult to get access to that foundational data on which to train, on which to reference. It's not like OpenAI contracting to get Reddit data and training a large language model. Like, where do you get access? And if you're not an incumbent, if you're not the EMR or you're not Microsoft, if you're any of these amazing companies that are out here, I mean, you can walk into the vendor hall and there's hundreds of AI companies. How are they supposed to move forward without data? Synthetic data doesn't cut it. And the biggest challenge in healthcare right now is the data problem itself has two big Achilles heels. One is how do you ensure security and compliance, right? How do you ensure that things like PHI don't get exposed to a large language model, where then you have risk that large language model is going to retain those PHI elements and potentially disclose them in the future. Like, that's a risk that nobody wants to take. So ensuring data is fully certified, de-identified, secure, compliant, that's an important piece foundationally. And then the second piece to this is, after we then talk about even how do you get access to it, but how do you ensure data is representative?
Yeah.
And I think you may remember, in the press earlier this year, there was a lot of talk about generative AI creating images that weren't representative. And, the public was really, really caught off guard by that and realizing that, hey, the algorithm itself needs to have actually representative data in order to generate a representative image. That's all good and well. Nobody got harmed by that, right? But if you have a large language model that, let's say, predicts adverse events, right? And it's not trained on data that represents every geography, region, ethnicity, etc., and that algorithm isn't inclusive of certain populations and now doesn't actually provide safety for them, like, that's a big concern. So those elements, right, from representation to security, compliance, and then the final piece, of course, is provenance. One of the biggest challenges with AI in healthcare is that AI generally is a black box. Yeah, it spits out an output, and then you have to sit there and say, okay, well, is that real? Is it hallucinating, right? We pray and we hope. And AI doesn't have to be like that in healthcare, because we can actually take source data and be able to reference it. So you can create it. You can create the approach where the AI can put an output out there, and then you can trace it back to the actual episodes of care to validate, right? De-identified episodes of care. And that's an important piece. And that's one of the reasons why you want to use real data, source data, not synthetic data, right? Where there's no provenance and there's no truth that you can validate. Yeah. Because we can take no risk, right? There's zero risk tolerance for patients.
Hey, I see you're up on the big fancy stage later in the event here at Health. Is this kind of some of the stuff you'll be sharing?
Yeah.
10 days today?
I'm talking on Tuesday afternoon. I think the name of the talk is EHRs, are they glorified filing cabinets?
Yep.
And, of course, a biased opinion, but my argument is no. EHRs are foundationally, they are a complicated source of data, but they're a critical source of everything that we're going to need to innovate. So I'll spend some time talking about how Omni today empowers 500 million providers all across the country to step forward in data-driven partnerships, over 1 billion encounters on the platform, how we align all of this data and turn it from a system that was designed for really, EMRs are really designed for billing and reconciliation. Right? Like, that's really what they're built for. But taking that data and turning it into research and regulatory grade information that can then power innovation, power rare disease research, power clinical trials, power the next generation of AI work, and do it securely, safely, compliantly, and in a representative manner.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what I'll be talking about on Tuesday.
Amazing. Looking forward to it. And lastly, future-facing question. I mean, a lot to be done. We've kind of touched on a fair bit of it already, but where are your priorities at over the next 6, 12, 24?
Yeah, so we're scaling the platform really quickly. We'll be north of 100 million patients on the platform by the end of the year, and then next year grow to about 150 million.
Mm.
So a lot of our focus right now is on continuing to make sure that we expand in a representative manner that really touches into the communities, helps engage populations who are traditionally neglected from research or don't have those same opportunities. Right? I'll crack the joke that we don't need another clinical trial, at the same, let's say, academic institutions. We need them out in the community. We need people to be able to get access to the same life-saving research. But the flip side of that is, let's say a medical device company is doing safety research, right? And if they're not doing safety research on data that represents every American, are we truly making these devices safer for every American, right? So that's the big piece as we look at our national focus.
Sure.
There's expansion and growth there. And then just, forming what I think is a secure, compliant pathway forward for AI collaboration, because everyone's excited by it. It's very thrilling, but it's still the Wild West right now.
Yeah.
And everyone's trying to figure out kind of how to approach this space. And I want to make sure that we never forget that this industry is centered on the patient. So security, compliance, patient privacy, and then frankly, patient safety, right? Because I'll use the example that if I go on my phone today and ask where to have dinner in Vegas, and it gives me 5, the GPT on my phone gives me 5 recommendations. I go to the first one and it's closed on a Monday. I'm annoyed, but nothing bad happens. I go to the next restaurant. But if the GPT is a paid, one that tells me to use drug A instead of drug B, and it turns out drug A leads to a complication, right? Like there's no tolerance for that, right? So that's the space where everyone's really excited by the potential, and I think there's incredible potential. But we need to have the right data, the right security, the right compliance behind it. Otherwise, we're setting ourselves up not just for failure, but for harming patients, which we can't tolerate that.
I'm Noura Abul-Husn. I am the Vice President of Genomic Health at 23andMe. And my background is as an internist and medical geneticist who's really been thinking about the role of genetics in healthcare at large.
Excellent. Thank you, Noura. Tell me a little bit more about this genetics in healthcare, and it's been a hot topic and a lot of insights. But this is definitely your jam. Walk me through a little bit more about, I guess, the power of that in this current existing health climate.
It is definitely my jam. What's really exciting to me today about where we are and thinking about genetics and genomics and having that knowledge at our fingertips is it's just a really different story from even a decade or 5 years ago. And the reason for that is that the knowledge has evolved in such a way and the science has evolved that we understand that genetics really plays a role for everyone in every area of health, in disease, in every medical specialty, for every person, in every context, at every stage of their life. And what that means is that we can really position genetics in a different way, where it's not just being used to solve a problem, but it's being used to prevent those problems from occurring altogether.
Yeah. How would you say that the, I guess, understanding in the general public is of, I guess, the power of some of these indicators and genomics, genetics, and I guess the impact that some of those changes and interventions you can make based on some of these indications can have on their current health?
It's variable, but what we do know is that you can find genetic influences and impact across the vast majority of both rare and common diseases today. And so if you tell me about a health condition that you're interested in or that you have a family history of, then probably there is some genetic component to that. It may not be the entire story, and for most things it isn't, but it plays an important role. And what we know today is that you need that baseline information about someone's genetics to really think about what their roadmap is for health, for their healthcare trajectory, their journey. And then what you can do is layer on additional information, like knowledge about what their lifestyle is, their blood biomarkers, to see where they're at today. And then what can you actually change to impact that trajectory up or down?
I guess that's not something that traditionally we've kind of prioritized in the healthcare space, is that we're very good at doing stuff once it's happened in healthcare. And then prevention can be quite a subjective, difficult to measure and quantify topic. So I guess by leaning into some of these early indications and I guess the light switches that can be turned on and off inside your body, to be more familiar with these can be a powerful thing.
Yeah, we think it's extremely powerful. And you're right, it's not something that healthcare has traditionally focused on. We focus on treatment. So you go to the doctor most often when something is wrong and you want to fix that problem. And where genetics is poised to have the most impact is when you're healthy, and even potentially when you're first born, to just understand your health trajectory in front of you and that roadmap of health, and take those opportunities to stay healthy, to optimize health, to live not just a longer life, but a long and healthy life as much as possible.
Yeah, gotcha. And so 23andMe, obviously a fair bit of legacy in this space and a well-known name. What's the role of 23andMe at the moment in terms of, integrating some of this into the healthcare system?
Well, the most recent thing that we've done that we're really excited about is something called Total Health, which is bringing in advanced genetic sequencing to understand someone's predisposition for a number of conditions that we consider to be actionable. And what that means is that those are things that if you know someone has a genetic risk, genetic predisposition for those conditions, there's something you can do today to mitigate that risk, to avoid the problem, to prevent it. Or if you can't prevent it, to catch it as early as possible so that you have the highest chances to have a good health outcome. And so what we've done is put that together in a way that informs people really comprehensively about their genetics. And then also, because your genetics, again, gives you that roadmap, but doesn't necessarily tell me where you're at today. So we include blood testing for labs that will inform that. Like, what is your cardiometabolic health today? Yeah. And all of these are informed by expert clinical care, so that you're not just being given information, you're being told very specifically what it means, what is a comprehensive risk assessment for you, and then what is a personalized recommendation plan that I can make to make sure that you stay healthy for as long as possible.
Yeah, gotcha. And who's this particularly geared towards? Because, sometimes, I guess if we were thinking more broadly about the wellness space or even longevity or the living well space, sometimes it can be much easier to position these types of solutions to those that are not in the most need of care. So, or like the most affluent, or there's more opportunity to be able to assist at a broader scale. And if we can make these things more accessible and address issues, there's potentially a lot of benefit to hit the people that needs the most. Like, what are the kind of demographics or the people that would really benefit from something like the solutions that you're talking about to address these issues earlier on?
Ultimately, there are solutions for everyone who wants to be an active participant in their own health journey. You're right, there's not always access to that kind of information. And that's one of the things that we've seen, that genetics is just not routinely part of the healthcare picture. Most people are not being offered genetic testing unless they've come to clinical attention for a very specific reason, to be finding an etiology for a problem that they already have, for example, and we're trying to solve it. And what we need more of is just general access to knowledge that can empower people who want to be active participants in their own health journey. And that can be anyone, but I agree. I think there's a lot that we can do to improve access across the board for genetics and any new technology that we're bringing into the healthcare space, really.
Yeah, that's true. Speaking of lots of different technologies in this space, we're here at Health, and I noticed you're up on a stage, you're sharing insights with attendees. Are these the types of insights that you're sharing up on the stage? Tell me about what you've been presenting.
Well, there was a panel today that I was a participant on called Your Digital Doppelganger, and really was focusing on where the digital twin technology is today and different applications in healthcare, in the pharmaceutical industry as well. And I think it really is pertinent to what we're trying to do at 23andMe, what I think about. If you think about digital twins, that idea of a twin is, scientifically defined by having shared genetic information. And so what you want to do is really understand, if there were a digital twin of me, sharing that genetic information, that genetic makeup, and then have different lifestyles and understand what the impact is of your environment, your socioeconomic factors, and your other risk factors and other things that are happening to you in your life. The more we learn, the more we're able to understand how those different modifiable things can be manipulated to ultimately improve your health outcomes.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that we've been talking about here today. And in addition, just in general, where is AI taking this? And so, of course, with genetics, you have an abundance of data coming from sequencing and genotyping. And what you need is the right tools to synthesize that information with the other abundance of data coming from wearables, coming from all of the other things that we're generating today, and aggregating it and synthesizing it so it makes sense, and then delivering it in a way that people understand it and know what to do with it.
Yes.
Whether it's a patient, a consumer, or a clinician, those are the problems that we're trying to solve.
My name's Justin Mardjuki. I'm CEO of Savant, which is a clinical documentation AI solution for acute care. Excellent. For acute care specifically, tell me a little bit more about the problem that you're solving there. Yeah, so the specific problem in acute care is there's such a wide range of encounters, such a wide range of variability in those encounters that the documentation effort for those physicians in emergency rooms and urgent cares is much greater than something like an orthopedic surgeon, for example, where you can copy and paste the notes to some degree. Yeah, interesting. And so we're all super excited here at Health and within the ecosystem generally around the potential for AI to help improve efficiency and potentially quality of care and all those really important things. And an area that seems for immediate opportunity is in this assisting with documentation side. Why is it specifically that the acute side requires that particular focus? One from the outside might look and think, well, all documentation requirements are the same. Yeah, so in 2023, CMS changed their billing guidelines for acute care to really shift away from just a bullet-pointed list, more or less, of the procedures and tasks that were accomplished in that encounter to focus much more on the medical decision-making for that patient. And what that meant is, as a doctor, instead of just typing in the bullet list of procedures, you had to sit down and write out an entire, sometimes page-long medical decision-making of why you diagnose a patient a certain way, why you dispose them in a certain way, and all the differential diagnoses that you ruled out. And as a clinician, that's why you went to school for 10, 15 years, right? To then have to sit down and explain your thinking. That's like us having to explain why, I think I'm not a doctor, but it's like us having to explain why and how we do long division, right? So there's a huge potential for AI to take the decision, the diagnosis that the doctor's already made, right, and help explain their thinking based on all of the clinical and billing guidelines. Got you. And this is out there being used in the wild now, is that right? Yeah, it is. It's live in over 30 sites. We're doubling that footprint probably in the next 4 to 6 months. So we're seeing really strong adoption because it's such a huge time saver for clinicians, right? You can shrink charting time from 12, 13 minutes per encounter down to 90 seconds. And, you can really see the increased efficiency on the billing, RCM, and quality side as well. So a bit of a win-win there. Yeah. And how do you approach the, one concern when I speak to CIOs, CTOs, and looking at input, trying to save time, improve efficiency, do more with less, looking at, an AI documentation tool, and particularly in the acute care side, quality and accuracy of information is going to be paramount. We're in healthcare, can't make any mistakes. What kind of safeguards are how do you approach that whole need for innovating really quickly, but also doing things super safely and securely? Yeah, so two angles to think about. I think the first is that ultimately the traditional metrics around efficiency are the ones that ultimately matter, right? So medical groups are very good at looking at clinician efficiency, charges per hour, charges per encounter, right, and understanding how those tick up or down over time. Yeah. So the first most important thing is, are you at minimum not making an impact on those numbers and still able to save physicians time at the end of the shift? Or at best, which we're now seeing in Savant, can you actually lead to an increase in those numbers? So that's part one of the guardrail, which is you can't get so enamored with the science project that it's not actually translating to real clinical and efficiency results. The second, on a much more granular level, is thinking about those exact LLM AI guardrails, right? And there's, you can imagine thousands of tests that you run iteratively every time you change a prompt, every time you change an agent, right, to make sure that it's only capturing procedures that were mentioned in the room. Mm-hmm. It's not changing a doctor's disposition, right? And so, like many other companies in the space, right, we've put in pretty robust guardrails so you can track this actually on a agent by agent, encounter by encounter basis, and actively review them to have human quality review of these charts. Yeah. I'm actually interested in also understanding your take on sometimes these tools are almost like shadow IT, or like they're brought up through by clinicians because they see the benefit of using these firsthand. Other times, we're very good in healthcare at enforcing technology down on the systems, and this is what you're going to use now, or at least that's what we try and do. How have you found the best adoption for your particular tools within healthcare? Has it been like bottom up, top down, or a little bit of that?
So I'm a bit biased because I grew up at the beginning of my SaaS journey at Box, which at the time was competing with Dropbox, and they took polar opposite approaches, right? Box was very enterprise IT driven, very compliance, security heavy. Dropbox was use what you will, and we hope IT won't find out about it. And so, in the AI scribe space, we see a lot of these solutions that are very, clinician by clinician, put a credit card down, shadow IT. Yeah. And we think that there's really an upper limit to what you can do with those kinds of solutions because they're not going to be aligned with how the group thinks about billing, how the group thinks about quality measures. And so we've taken, not necessarily a top-down approach, but we've taken a more methodical approach where, either at a site level or at a system level, right, you're able to enforce those kinds of guidelines across your physicians. And, the physicians also like it because it means less documentation burden for them. Right? Yeah. So in architecting it in that way, I think is the right partnership between leadership and clinicians on the ground.
I think so. And the last thing you want is for a clinician to be comfortable with a tool that they've brought in and then to later find out that it's, not compliant and it's been blocked out. And so you want to be able to ensure that stakeholders are aligned there. Hey, you and I were up on a stage yesterday and I was moderating a conversation with you and Nika about taking AI from 0 to 1 and engaging with the investor community as well as the providers too. What did you take away from those sessions and the discussions that we had there?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, you can't walk 3 feet here without seeing AI, large language model, large model, right? And it almost seems like there's a lot of talk of those technologies without actual business problems behind them. And so if you can actually tie a business problem to it, it's just enabling technology, right? Like we don't talk about the cloud technology anymore the way people might have 10 or 15 years ago, right? And I think, that's something that we need to remind ourselves in healthcare, which is ultimately it's all just technology that is in service of a real problem for an end user, and in my case, a clinician. And doesn't matter if it's large language model, small language model, AI, machine learning, regression model, right? It's all in the service of were you able to help a doctor get home on time and chart more accurately.
Yeah, gotcha. Hey, lastly, Savant, there's lots going on, lots of inspiration here at Health, new partners, new opportunities. What's really your focus over the next 6, 12, 24 months?
Yeah, I'm really excited to see our impact, both independently as a company on some of those efficiency metrics we talked about, but you're seeing much more, I think, eagerness across the ecosystem, right, of RCM, trying to get upstream into workflow. You're starting to see companies that own clinical content or clinical guidelines, right, want to embed in workflow. So I think that's going to be a really interesting space over the next 6 to 12 months to think about how we, as Savant, right, that has a clinician's attention and focus at that point of diagnosis and assessment, incorporate, some of these either upstream or downstream entities, but not have it be, a steady stream of alerts that eventually a clinician will tune out. So we're really excited to figure that out.
My name is Pano, Anthos, and I'm the founder and managing director of XRC Ventures, based in New York City and LA.
Thank you, Pano. XRC, tell me a little bit more about what you do.
So we are a venture fund that focuses on the earliest investments, super early, pre-seed, in the categories where consumer behavior and intersects technology. So we care deeply about consumer attitudes, behaviors, shifts, and how that technology then influences it. So we invest in both brands and technologies that influence consumers.
Interesting. And healthcare and different verticals?
Yeah, so we do retail vertical, e-commerce verticals, supply chain. Those are not really verticals, they're really kind of capabilities.
Yeah.
And then the consumerization of healthcare came about because we were watching wallets move more and more to healthcare, consumer wallets. And the retailers were starting to try to figure out how do we provide proxy services to the consumer. They have failed, but they'll come back.
Tell me a bit more about that, because, we were chatting just before we record, we got CVS, we've got a lot of the retail healthcare scene, and in other parts of the world, watching with interest in the US, it's like, the consumerization of healthcare, and it's landing everywhere. And there's a few announcements in Australia specifically of this kind of thing happening. You mentioned it's failed. Tell me more.
Well, Walmart put this big initiative together, and then they shut it down 6 months ago, a couple of years in the making. CVS has really struggled to take their health hubs. They've bought clinics, they've bought everything, and none of it's worked. And that is not a function of the consumer and what the consumer wants. It's really about the enterprise not being able to deliver what the consumer is asking for. So we're not necessarily trying to support the retailer, but we're taking lessons from what the consumer wants and figuring out how to deliver it more effectively. So we think that there's a parallel system that is evolving as it did in e-commerce. So first there were stores, and the only thing you do is buy stuff at a store. And then you had this thing called Amazon and some e-commerce, which has taken 20% of the business away from the stores. In healthcare, we believe that virtual care, asynchronous telemedicine and so forth, is that e-commerce platform. That's going to take 20%, maybe 30%, who knows, of primary care, low-level services. Not obviously therapeutics is a little challenging, but a lot of work in dermatology, a lot of work in allergy that can be done remotely. All right, so that's step one. Step two is that they will then go to a local location, which is, you're seeing all these care clinics all over the place, right, that have been built and are not necessarily doing that well, in part because they're not really run like a CRM. You're not really thinking about what we really need to do, and this is where we think the opportunity exists, is we need to bring concierge-level service via technology to a moderately priced market. So, as you know, you can get anything you want in a concierge situation, but you pay royally for it.
Yeah.
And they know who you are, and they know everything about you, and they really care for you. We can deliver technology against that capability to give the moderate classes, the middle classes, that same level of service.
And are those the types of organizations that we might see in that portfolio of investments under XRC, those that might kind of fit as part
technologies?
Of
Yeah, we're not really big on physical four walls. We really focus on more of the virtualization. And we will do some consumer hardware because it has impact. So we've got this earring here, smart earring. Cool. That is a really amazing device, much more accurate than anything.
Running out of room to do that.
I know. But it's much more accurate. And then we've got this radiology as a service benefit, as an employee benefit, that's cutting the cost of radiology by 60% nationwide. So any employer self-insured can actually turn it on because radiology is really a commodity. And the radiologist is not a commodity, but the radiology scan is a commodity. And yet we're charged ridiculous rates, overpriced, fancy machines that don't really do much more than they did 20 years ago. So that's we're going after the kind of disrupting this kind of cost of care that's really out of line.
Yeah, interesting. Though there's a lot of different technologies I've seen here at Health that are geared towards the consumer or putting more control or visibility of patients' healthcare in their hands. Where have you seen success and failure in these types of organizations? Like when they go down the wrong path, or perhaps is there advice for those that are looking to really gear their technology solution towards the consumer market? What are some of the do's and don'ts?
Well, you first have to really know who is paying for this.
Yeah.
And usually a lot of entrepreneurs have no idea that there's this thing called providers, there's this thing called payers, and there's this thing called the consumers. So there's a real lot of confusion in that as an entrepreneur if you're new to the game. But once you figure out who your payer is or who your, you have to deliver massive ROI very, very quickly. High impact, low effort. So let me talk about this radiology as a service. We've had him sign major multinationals with 30,000, 40,000 employees as an employee benefit because they don't have to do anything. And the savings go right to the bottom line of the organization. So the pitch to the CFO is, we'll save you $4 million in EBITDA. Not cost, EBITDA, because all that money goes right back into your bank account that you would otherwise be paying out to a radiology service unnecessarily.
Yeah. So you're going to demonstrate that ROI up front?
Yep.
Any other?
And you have to have a frictionless onboarding process. If it's really complicated or if your ROI is not tangible and it's kind of mushy, a lot of value-based care is kind of like, we think they're going to get better. And I don't mean to be negative, but the CFOs are very hard-nosed about this. And the benefits people, the consultants, are even worse now because they've been sold value-based care for years and it hasn't really delivered. Yeah. So you've got to really walk in with a hard ROI or an auditable ROI that says, I can audit your patient records and see this is what we're going to save you. Yeah. And then measure against that and price against it.
I was thinking, as you said that, I mean, on the value-based care or the preventative side, it's difficult to quantify the benefit when something hasn't happened. So,
right. Insurance companies love that.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And so you're sharing some insights with attendees during the session as well.
Yeah, I spoke on a panel on this kind of wellness, consumer wellness and venture funding world. It was a great panel. Google Ventures, Able Ventures, BBG, great people. And Insight Partners, and we had a really discussion. Yeah. And it was everywhere and anywhere. It was a good discussion.
Yeah. And so, who are the types of people you've been chatting with here at Health? Obviously, you've got a few different stakeholders you engage with on the technology side, on the investor side, and if anyone hasn't had a chance to catch up with you, who are you really looking for at the moment?
Well, we have a bunch of startups here, so I had to meet with them.
Yeah.
Another one, Ash Wellness, which is doing in-home testing and killing it. I mean, really. Their Noom is using them for all their in-home testing, which is really interesting. So we see these. We have to spend time with the startups, care and feeding. I am looking at, I like to look but not talk to founders. I want to really see what the messaging is before I get sucked into the sales pitch.
Yes,
because then you can't get out. And so I tend to, having been a sales executive and sat at a lot of booths for a long time.
Yeah.
I'm very aware that you got to give people their space.
Yeah.
And so I walk the floor. I have a few conversations, and obviously they have these one-on-ones with investors. And some of them are really interesting, and some of them are like, you should really rethink this business.
Yeah. I feel like you're listening to a lot of podcast episodes then. I know a good one. Lastly, any kind of takeaways that you're walking away from Health here on the final day that have kind of sparked your interest or reaffirmed some thoughts about the direction of healthcare generally?
So the topic of female wellness has been dear to us. So we have about 150 companies we've invested in. Nearly 50% are run by women. Right. That's way over indexed to any venture fund that's out there. So we've always naturally gravitated toward female founders. And so female wellness has been important both with the Smart Earring. We also have a bulimia network that's amazingly effective at reducing bulimic conditions for women. And they deserve a lot more attention than they're getting. So I'll put a little quiz to you. Here in the U.S., when did the feds decide that you had to have women in clinical trials? What year?
I'm going to say it's either... Wasn't Jill just talking about last year? Or only recently?
1994.
Yeah.
1994. In our lifetime, well, some of our lifetimes, that you could basically produce a drug for women and men and not have women in the clinical trials. That is insane. So we have a very hierarchically male-oriented healthcare system, both in terms of drug delivery, everything. You can name it, right? So we're just loving the fact that women are getting a lot more attention and are going to get a lot more support because they're different. They have a 28-day cycle. We have a 24-hour cycle. That simple fact is missing from all the wearables, for example. It makes me crazy. So I love that. So there's a lot of attention toward female wellness.
Yeah. Any other final thoughts to because we've got all different types of stakeholders here at Health. Any other advice you would give to those looking to really make an impact?
For the founders who I talk to all the time and who have AI in every name on every board here, it's a little trite now. So really make an impact. Say that, deliver the value, and then say it's because we do all this really cool AI stuff. Don't put it in your name and don't overemphasize it. Deliver value, because in 5 years it'll be something else. When I say something else, it'll be another derivative. So, there's always powered by, which is a great concept, but let's not abuse the term.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Talking Health Tech. Make sure you like and subscribe and share this episode with someone who might find it valuable. For more information and resources about healthcare innovation, visit talkinghealthtech.com.